today's episode of Coaching Coordinator. We talk about teaching players in the classroom and the most efficient teaching techniques. We focus on quarterback mechanics and talk about the importance of networking in our profession. And joining me to talk about all those things is the passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Monmouth University, TJ DiMuzio. TJ, great to have you here on the podcast.
Keith, really excited to be here. I appreciate you having me on. It's an honor to be on this podcast. It's a great tool for a lot of college coaches and coaches all across the country.
Coach, we always start with learning a little bit about your journey here and starting out with what was it that made you want to become a college football coach?
Yeah, I mean, as a young guy growing up, I was, played quarterback and, thought that was going to happen for the rest of my life, be able to play in the NFL. And shortly after I started college, realized that might not be a possibility for me. So I ended up transferring. I was at Fairfield University. The program got shut down, unfortunately, and ended up transferring to Delaware. Obviously hoping to play, but really thinking, it's best for my career in order to get in contact with some of those coaches there. And was able to, my senior year, the end of my senior year, start coaching on the defensive side of the ball as a student assistant. And that was, thankful to Coach Dave Cohen, had me on. And ironically, right after that year of my senior year of coaching, he was able to get the head coaching job at Hofstra. And from there, hired me as the tight ends coach right out of graduation. So I was, lucky in that aspect that I was there at the right time and right place and with the right guy. And I think after that first year, it was just a no-brainer. I never saw myself in a 9-to-5 job sitting at a desk. I always wanted to be around football one way or another. And I think the fact that it was everything sort of just fell into place for me when I went to Hofstra. I was graduating school. He had just taken a job. They had a restricted earnings position open, and it was back on the opposite side of the ball. So I think everything just fell into place. And that first year in Hofstra, I mean, we weren't great, but I loved every single day of it. And that's when I knew, I knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
That's definitely some forethought there on making that move to Delaware to finish up your college career with the thought of being somewhere that will help you get to your next step, that you are going to be a college coach. And you go to a place that just has a ton of history and tradition, starting with, that really being the birthplace of the modern wing tee with Tubby Raymond. What was it like just being part of that history and tradition?
Yeah, it was special. And I should mention as well that my father played at Delaware back in 1969, was a starting quarterback there, and was a great, one of Tubby's favorite players, because Tubby always used to tell the story about when my father started his first game. I think it was, crowd was packed and he came out. It was, I think he threw like 4 interceptions in the first half, and he comes off to the sideline, and Tubby said, Tubby's trying to put his arm around him, not knowing what to say. And my dad looked at Tubby and said, "Don't worry, the fans will stop booing you soon." And it was just, Tubby always used to tell that story. I used to love it. And so I grew up sort of learning the wing tee and understanding that, and my dad trying to install waggle passes with my high school team. And it's just a really special atmosphere. I was there, played under Coach Casey Keeler. We were in my first year there where we won the national championship in 2003. So that was another special thing, special timing for me to be a part of that team. And then, when I came back to Delaware to coach there after my stint at Hofstra, Joe Flacco was the quarterback there, the first year, and we went to the national championship. Unfortunately lost to the Appalachian State team that beat Michigan that year. But again, just another wild ride, and truly blessed to be in that situation so early, to be around so many national championships early in my career, and being around guys like Joe Flacco, Omar Cuff, and Delaware is a special, special place.
Yeah, I think that's really neat. Just the influences you start to mention there. When you look at those early years of your career, thinking back to some of those, I guess you'd say, lessons or things that happened to you, experiences, the mentorship, all of those things. things that happened in that time, what do you feel like you learned from then that you really carry on today and is part of who you are as a coach?
I can remember when I became a student coach on the defensive side of the ball at Delaware. I was a typical college student. I was, maybe sleeping in and coming into the meetings. Like, they didn't need me at the meetings, but I could have been there. So there wasn't a whole ton of, strict time management on my part. And Dave Cohen pulled me aside and said, listen, if you want to do this and really be a part of this, you can, but you gotta be there, right? The best ability is availability. And I think that really stuck with me. It was just being there and being around the office, even when, you may not be needed right at that moment or the next 5 minutes, the next 20 minutes, but just being around and sort of learning to love the office. And, that's what I started to do from that point on, is that, I was going to, eat and sleep in the office, and just not because I had to or because of work, but that's really what I found out that I wanted to be doing. That's what I enjoyed doing more than anything else. So that lesson definitely stuck with me in terms of, how much time you really have to be put into this thing to be good at it, especially as a young coach. You have to be the guy that's staying late and not getting paid anything and, doing all the grunt work. You have to be that, because that's how you learn. I learned through drawing thousands and thousands of cards, and if you don't go through that stuff, I don't think you're as equipped to be successful as you move on. So great lessons from Coach Cohen, from Coach Keeler, Coach Kirk Shiraka when I was at Delaware. I played under him and then was able to coach under him as well. And, he just taught me a ton of scheme about the game, and really take like how he handled players. I thought was tremendous. How you handle a talent like Joe Flacco, because it's easy to maybe easier to coach him on the field than other guys, but just being able to balance guys that are that good and treating them differently than others, but not unequal, or what I mean, like just not over coaching them, I guess is the point I'm trying to get across.
So for you, there's a definite influence as well from your family, right? Educators, your mom was a teacher. You mentioned your dad coaching. That kind of plays a part in how you approach the classroom part of this game, right? It's not just about on the field, really, at any level anymore. High schools are using meeting times, etc. There's some definite techniques and things you've leaned on to make sure your players are learning best. Talk to us about some of the methods and the things you believe in using in the classrooms parts of your coaching.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches love to be on the field, and not that I don't. I love the field, but I love the classroom. I love preparing for the classroom. I love everything a part of it. I love coming in the morning, seeing the guys' faces, me being awake because I've had too much coffee, and them sort of sleepwalking in, and me finding a way to wake them up day in, day out. But that's my most favorite part of being a college football coach. And I think what I've learned, through my parents, through different teachers I've had, through different books I've read, is that you only have a certain amount of time. You have to be efficient in that meeting room. Yeah, you can have a 2-hour meeting, but you really only are getting, 20, 30 minutes of their focus throughout that. So, and I've read a couple of different books about, the human mind only has like 17 minutes to pay attention. That's why those TED Talks are 17 minutes and all those types of things. So, I read those things, I learn them. I'm not any sort of doctorate, or I don't have any sort of doctorate or anything like that, but I think it is interesting and important to understand, how the human mind works. So, if we have a 50-minute meeting, which is rare, but let's say we did, I'm not going to spend 50 minutes talking. I'm going to spend the first 5 minutes installing the most important things that we need to do that day, right? And then maybe we're watching film for the next 10, and then we're going to take a break. And then when we come back, I'm going to then install the next most important things that need to go, because that's when I have their best attention, is those first 5 minutes and maybe those last 5 minutes before we take a break. And then when you come back for break, that's when you can sort of refocus them and get those most important things installed. You know, and there's a bunch of different teaching tools that I've picked up throughout the years, you know, making sure that kids are writing things down. Yeah, I got it, coach. I got it. Write it down, right? Repeat it out loud. When you repeat it out loud, you remember things. Like anybody telling you a phone number, right? You're trying to remember that phone number. Say it out loud 3 times. Using different mnemonic devices, rhymes to help them remember things. And I think all those things have helped me, as well as picking up, you know, making sure that when they leave the meeting, hey, what are 3 things that you guys are questioning still? What are 2 things that you feel pretty good on? And tell me 1 thing that you enjoyed about the meeting today. You know, and just, we call it 3, 2, 1 at the end of the meeting. Just some of those things that, you know, have helped me become a better teacher, so those guys can learn the game better. And, you know, as this a long-winded answer, but I think the other important thing too is that when you're in the meeting room is that you do test them with some speed. You know, yes, I can ask you, hey, what do you do versus this coverage, and have them give an answer, and have them 30 seconds to give an answer. This is the best play versus cover 2, right? But can he do it in 10 seconds? Can he set the protection? Can he, you know, hand signal the route? And can he know what he's doing all within 10 seconds? So we spend a lot of time not only just doing tests, but speed tests. Give him a signal, give me an answer, and go. Give him a signal, give me an answer, next play. All those types of things. And that's why, you know, I love the meeting room, because that's where I think you can get so many reps done and in a controlled space.
Yeah, I love a lot of those things you brought up are great. And starting with the idea at the beginning of, you know, there being a certain amount of time. And I mentioned to you before we got going, when we were talking about this topic, that I was reading a book called Limitless by a guy by the name of Jim Quick. It's Kwik. And there's a part where he's talking exactly about what you just mentioned. And it's kind of based on part of it, two things. The forgetting curve, which means retention is going to decrease. That longer that session goes on, you won't remember everything in there the longer the session is. So the idea of having shorter sessions, as you said, 17 minutes. In the book, he mentions, you know, using the Pomodoro technique, which is 25 minutes of learning or activity, 5-minute break. You let the brain rest. And then what it does, like you said, the beginning is where you place the most important things. And it's actually the beginning and at the end. So primacy, or the opening, and recency, the closing. That you're going to remember things at the beginning of a learning session or study session, and things at the end better than you will in the middle. So by shortening that time, and let's say you do have, you know, an hour and a half in the classroom, you're smart to break it up, because you create more of those cycles where you have that opening and that closing, and you're able to get better retention. And, you know, just, I think some of the science behind that is really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think every coach has, you know, certain things that they sort of gravitate to in terms of make them a better coach, you know, whether it's recruiting, understanding the roadmaps to get different schools, or, you know, understanding which are the best food stops to stop at in certain areas, or whatever it may be, things that you really just enjoy outside of it being your job. And for me, I really enjoy understanding how the human brain works and learning about those. And again, I can't use any technical terms. I read a lot of them, but I have no idea what they mean. But I enjoy learning things like the 17-minute rule, reading a book like Moonwalking with Einstein by Josh Foer, I think, you know, and that just how, like, you can get a list of things, of 12 things and different techniques of how you can remember those 12 things. And I won't go through it all now, but when you read about those things and you're like, wow, how did I not learn that throughout school? It's just amazing to me sometimes how the human brain can work, and learning the techniques that we can help our players use to become better and more efficient with their time.
No doubt that's something that's recently gotten my attention. I've been spending a lot of time reading on as well. You know, as we move this out onto the field, you know, one of the things you mentioned as far as the work you like to do with quarterbacks in the mechanics isn't necessarily messing around with the arm or arm angles, especially by the time they get to you, that you like focusing on some different things to help them improve as a quarterback outside of messing with their arm. Talk to us about what you feel the most important things are in getting these guys to be able to perform at the best level throwing the football.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that we are recruiting we are doing a good enough job recruiting that I don't have to mess a ton with a kid's motion once he gets here. That's sort of why I recruit him. I want to know that he can make different arm angle throws and that he can get the ball out fast. But once I get him, what I focus mostly on is that he's on balance when he throws. Understanding that we can't always be on balance, but when we can be on balance and when we can throw a three-step drop, quick game, whatever, we want to make sure that we're as consistent as possible when we can do that. So I learned a lot of techniques that I know from a guy named Mario Verduzco, who's out in Nebraska, I think quarterback's coach. He had trained me when I was coming out of high school, and I was much better listener than I was a doer. But I remember a lot of things that he said in terms of the body being on balance when it throws and being able to hold your weight back till that specific time for your hips to turn and open. Everybody can see nowadays, Dak Prescott and Jameis Winston doing those weird hip things, but that's a lot of what we work on. And that's a lot of what we spend time on is transferring the weight from your back foot to your front foot and being able to throw on balance. And obviously that's in a perfect world. You're getting a drop back. There's nobody in your face and you're able to throw on balance. And so that's what we prepare for, trying to be accurate when we can be there. And then, the rest of it is, learning to throw off balance, learning to do that. But that's really the starting point for me, is teaching them to throw with the lower half of their body so that they can be as accurate and as consistent as possible.
What are a couple drills you really like in terms of being able to utilize that to teach your quarterbacks?
So there's a couple things, and a lot of them are warm-up drills for us now. Standing with, if I'm a righty, standing with my right foot forward, twisting and throwing, having the 2 feet in cement, twisting and throwing, just as simple as keeping your feet forward, having a line in between them, like a line splitting the crotch of the player, and then just having them take one step back into their load step, as we call it, and then one step forward into their final throw. And then when they finish, their feet should be at the exact same point where they started. Again, it's a little tough to describe over a podcast, but hopefully that makes sense in that you're putting your weight back and you're putting your weight forward. And at the end of the day, your feet are back exactly where they started, parallel with that line that was splitting their crotch. And that shows, hey, I finished on balance. We always try to work on a line because the line tells us, hey, are we overstriding? Are we understriding? And then I can work on the weight balance from there. The other one that I like, that's a little bit different that we came up with, we call it Wild Wild West drill, is that we'll have, two quarterbacks walking away from each other as if they're in a duel. And as they continue to walk away, they have two receivers behind their backs that are sort of running around and moving and are covered by other guys. And then when I clap, what they have to do is flip around as fast as possible and set their feet and throw the ball to the open guy. And if he's covered, then they tuck and run. But I think that's a good sort of reaction drill of like, hey, my guy came open, I'm ready to throw it, I'm on balance. Or my guy isn't open, I'm on balance, I'm ready to take off. And I think it's just a good, like we talked about in those speed tests in the classroom, you can walk through it and make sure a kid's on balance doing it slowly, but this forces him to do it fast and try to get the ball out of his hands as fast as possible. Plus, I like the name of the Wild Wild West drill.
Yeah, it's always good to have a cool name for your drill.
Our running backs coach has the best names. He's got SSS, the Barry Sanders drill. He's the name king.
Coach, moving along, we said we were going to talk a little bit about networking. It's such an important part of our profession, really at any level today. And I'm finding, with what's happened over the last almost year now, the opportunities seem to be moving outside your normal region, where we seem to be limited by travel in jobs, because jobs are now being, interviewed for, and those things are being conducted virtually as well, that people are kind of expanding their search. So network becomes very important. From your viewpoint, what are some of the things that you've focused on to build your network?
Unfortunately, I think part of it is like you have to move around. You have to work with guys when you're young. You have to work on different staffs because, yeah, you can go to the convention and meet all these guys, but does that mean somebody's going to recommend you for a job? They might, but how much weight does it carry if they've never really worked for you? So I think that's part of it. I was lucky enough to, on that Hofstra staff, to work with a number of guys, and it was my first job. So, but on that Hofstra staff alone, there was, Mike Elko, who's the defensive coordinator at Texas A&M. I learned a lot from him. He's a mentor of mine, and, try to stay in touch with him. But it's Sean Spencer, who's the D-line coach of the New York Giants. Lyle Hemphill, defensive coordinator for Wake Forest, and the list goes on. I'm sure I'm forgetting John Perry, who's with the Houston Texans. So that staff, but then, then going to the Delaware staff and getting to work with the likes of, Kirk Shiraka, Ben Albert, Brian Ginn, a number of guys. So unfortunately, I think that's part of the young coach's best ability is to have to move around a little bit so that you can expand your network, because just meeting guys at camps and at network functions, I don't think you can get a full grasp and a great recommendation from those guys. It's when you work with people and people see your work ethic and go from there and then can make the decisions from there. So I think that's, part of being a young coach and coming up is that, sometimes you might have to bounce around a little bit.
As you move forward, 'cause you mentioned a lot of great names, quite a few of those guys actually presenting with you this past weekend at Lawrence First and Goal. What do you do to maintain that network, right? Because they go their separate directions, you go your different directions. How intentional are you about making sure you stay connected with those guys?
Yeah, and I'll say this, Keith, I don't think I'm good at it. I should be a lot better than I am. I would tell young guys to do a better job than I would, but, I will send text messages, I will do some of that. I used to write letters. I should get back into that. I really wish that's something maybe I will try to do going forward is, just stay more in touch and, to reach out, even if it's just little things saying, hey, I saw you guys ran this versus Texas the other week. What'd you think of that? Just some way to stay in touch and to stay on their minds. I've had guys that we've coached that were younger guys that were quality control coaches. And honestly, I learned a lot from them going through and staying in touch with how they've stayed in touch with me. So I've learned a lot through those guys, even through like following them just on social media and liking and commenting and all that stuff. Like that can help build your network. But more importantly, it just keeps you on the minds of certain people. So that's the biggest thing. And again, I think that's something I can do a much better job of than I have.
We mentioned Lawrence First and Goal, and I was able to catch a glimpse actually of quite a few of the talks. I think I was in yours for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and because I just loved the topic, QB friendly schemes, and that's a course now on CoachTube. For those who didn't attend the clinic, you're able to get it there. But again, a very interesting topic, and for our listeners, I guess if you could give kind of an overview of some of the things you talked about in your clinic talk.
Absolutely. Just because, and this past year, we were lucky enough to have a quarterback that was extremely smart. He was Big South Player of the Year. He was a 3-year starter. Kenji Bahar, just a tremendous kid and great learner of the game, would spend time watching film, knew a ton. And I think sometimes when you get a guy like that, you tend to, because he's so smart, there's an opportunity to try to make things more difficult on him or put more things on his plate. And I think part of my talk was about just because you have a guy like that doesn't mean you have to put more on his plate. There's still a lot of good, very good schemes out there. And what I talked a lot about are this or that schemes. And essentially what you're coming up is you're saying, hey, either I have this part of this play open, and if not, I have that part of this play. So for example, you're coming out, you're either going to have the one-on-one throw, or if you don't have that, then you're going to have the bubble. Or in a screen situation, you're going to have this throw before the screen, this quick game throw to the screen, or then you're going to have the screen part, which is that part. So I talked a lot about the this or that scheme in our offense, and just touching a little bit on the easier you can make it on the quarterback, the better, because that's when he's free to make plays, when he's not thinking, when he's able to react and just sort of be the quarterback that he is out there. When you give him 9,000 things to think about, hey, we're motioning this, and then we're shifting and trading, then you got to call the front. It's just too much. It's just too much. And I did a little exercise in the beginning on quarterback neuroplasticity and all the things that they possibly could have on their plate pre-snap. And it's just a lot. I don't care how smart you are. So a lot of the talk was just about making it as easy as possible on your quarterback when you can.
In terms of, especially your work in contributions to the game plan as far as the passing game goes, is there a magic number for you on how many concepts or how many calls you're going to carry into a game in terms of passing plays?
No, there's no real magic number. Coach Gallo, our offensive coordinator and tight ends coach who played here and now has been here over, I think, 16 years now, does a just phenomenal job balancing out our ideas. Between Coach Gabriel, Coach Callahan, Coach Dorsett, myself, we will come up with, hey, X amount of ideas for 1st and 10 and 2nd down. And then we'll have our 3rd down plays. And then what we do is he does a great job of coming back, hey, do we really want this? Do we really like this? And we trim it down from there. So we don't have a number. We know more so each week, hey, we can only do 3 new things this week, or we can only do 4 new different shifts or trades out of with this play this week. So there's no magic number. It's just more of a feel. And I think Coach Gallo does a tremendous job of having that feel of the balance between the coaches wanting to do everything and what our players can handle.
Coach, you shared some great stuff with us here today. When you look at all you do as a coach, you've mentioned on the field stuff, you mentioned off the field stuff, you mentioned networking, et cetera. What's the one thing you do as a coach that you really feel gives your guys the winning edge?
I'd have to go back to the classroom, Keith. I think what we get done in the classroom in that little amount of time between the speed tests and challenging them to get as many mental reps as possible in that room is probably what gives them the edge. We're going to have a situation this spring coming up where we're going to have a new quarterback. So we've been trying to have 3 to 4 guys compete for this job. And that's been hard because there's not enough reps to go around. So I think the ability to really challenge them in the classroom to get those mental reps is one of the best things that we do here, so that we can feel all 3 of those guys are able to go out and be ready to compete for this job and play at any time, especially in a year like this where you may need 3 guys to play. So I think that's where we get our edges in the classroom.
Coach, for our listeners out there, if they have a guy, what are your recruiting areas?
I recruit Eastern Pennsylvania, so Philadelphia, Bucks County, Delaware County, up to Northampton. I have Western New Jersey, Mercer County, and Hunterdon, and I have the state of Delaware. And
the best way to connect with you?
Best way to connect with me is through Twitter at Coach TJ D.
Coach, I really appreciate your time. Appreciate what all of you guys did, including yourself, for Lawrence 1st and Goal. Just a tremendous effort by everybody involved. And, best of luck to you and Monmouth as you guys head into a spring of 21 season.
Thanks, Keith. I really appreciate you having me on. This is a great podcast, a great tool for all the coaches across the country. And, just thank you for everything you're doing for the game.
Thank you again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com. And follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.